So the topic, in case you were wondering, of this afternoon session is human rights and land rights. And all of the speakers are going to be focusing on a sort of sub-theme within that general topic. So our next speaker is a stand-in for the Reverend Dr. Herbert Brown. And the topic is something to do with land rights and food. And I don't have a bio for Reverend Darriel Harris, so I'll let him introduce himself.
You have a timer somewhere, everyone. Is there a timer there? Oh, no.
20 minutes.
Okay. It's 20 minutes each.
Okay, hi. My name is Darriel Harris. As a way of introduction, I am licensed and ordained in the American Baptist Church. I am a PhD student at Johns Hopkins. I'm a graduate of Duke University of Divinity School. I'm a pastor-elect of a church called Newborn Community of Faith Church. It's in the west side of Baltimore, in Sandtown. Sandtown was made famous by, that's the neighborhood that Freddie Gray, who was killed in police custody, was from. So the neighborhood's been made famous through the infamous activities surrounding Freddie Gray's death. So I'm pastor-elect of a church there. I run a program out of Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Future called the Baltimore Food and Faith Project. And I'm a co-founder of the Black Church Food Security Network. So I'm filling in for Heber Brown, who is the leader of the Black Church Food Security Network. So I'm supposed to talk about food and ethics and land and people. And one of the big challenges that we have here in Baltimore is frankly that the people are dying. So if you live in a neighborhood where I pastor, the average life expectancy is around 62. 62.5 if you live across the street. It's a little better. But if you live in cross country, which is a well-to-do, about 95% white neighborhood in Baltimore, if you live in Roland Park, if you live in a few of the other affluent neighborhoods in Baltimore City, you can expect to live somewhere around 83, 84. So we're talking the same city, we're talking 20-year life expectancy difference. And the major thing killing people in the neighborhood where I pastor is food-related deaths, right? Diet-related deaths. It's going to be hypertension. It's going to be strokes. It's going to be some certain cancers. And so these are taking the lives frankly, of my people, of our people. So it's an issue, and our people are dying from it. We're dying from a lack of knowledge. A lack of knowledge around food, because we are consuming food that we didn't choose. We're consuming food that was given. And in large part, in America, given our American food system, no matter whether you're wealthy or you are impoverished, in large part, you're consuming food that's given. Because if I go to Whole Foods or if I shop at my local grocer, if the price of meat or the price of rice or the price of whatever goes up $1, I'm not a part of that decision. I'm just a consumer. And whatever Whole Foods sells me or whatever my grocer sells me is what is available to me. I don't really have a say in the matter. And so when food producers decided that they wanted to genetically modify salmon, and not only did they want to genetically modify salmon so that the salmon is taking too long to grow and mature, right, like naturally, so they wanted to have it done twice as fast, so they genetically modified it. And so not only did most people, like 99% of the population, not even know about it and have a say in the fact that that the salmon was going to be genetically modified, but they didn't have a say that it wasn't going to be labeled. They didn't have a say that it was going to be distributed with ordinary, naturally recurring salmon, such that the offspring in a few generations, you won't be able to tell the difference. So you're just going to consume it. So you don't really have, so no matter who you are in America, in large part, the food we're consuming, you don't really have, you don't have a lot of influence over. There's some, you're making some choices, but there's some larger things that are happening without your approval. But that is exaggerated, it's exacerbated in, frankly, the American ghetto, in places of concentrated poverty in America. So if you come to the neighborhood where I pastor, Sandtown, Winchester, or Upton, there's no grocery store there. So if I want to eat, what I end up eating is takeout, carry out. So the famous Baltimore food is the chicken box, right? 4 wings and fries. But if I eat that for lunch and dinner on most days, you can imagine what that does to my heart, right? You can imagine what that does even to my brain. If I'm eating cheesesteak and I'm eating outside the house constantly, some people do it for 3 meals a day. They're eating outside the house. So if you do this, because there's no grocery store, and because there's a low, the term is escaping me, but the number of people who have automobiles are greater than 30%. So there's a large swath of people who don't have cars. So they can't get to the grocery store that's in the other neighborhood. So they end up eating carry out, and then so we have all these issues, and people die 20 years longer than their fellow citizens who are a couple miles up the street. So this is a huge problem. And now we're ministers of the gospel, and we are here to meet the needs of the people, and we're discovering that our people are always sick, and to say that they die at 63 is not to say that you're healthy until 63 and then you drop off the earth, right? It's to say that you're having issues. Most people start having cardiovascular challenges somewhere in their 30s, and then it worsens and worsens and worsens until at 63 they finally expire, right? So it's not to say that. So it's an issue that starts quite early. So through that 30-year period where you're dealing with issues around health, the quality of life is diminished, productivity is diminished, ability to share and to help raise your children is diminished. So now, what are we going to do about that? So I'm a public health professional, and as a public health professional, the first thing that most of us think we want to do is we want to communicate. We want to do a campaign, right? We want to teach people how to eat healthy. We want to encourage them to make healthy decisions. We want to somehow make healthy food available in areas where it is not. But frankly, it's not enough. The amount of people who are able and willing to change their diet drastically through campaigns and public health efforts is minuscule. It's minuscule. So what can we do? And frankly, what we need is a new imagination. We need like a new person, a person who's not oriented in the way that we've been kind of trained over the last 40 years. And one of the ways in which we're trying to accomplish this is through land. It's through farming. It's through having the people in our various churches, the people who are in the Black Church Food Security Network, to have people who are in our various churches participate and become owners of the food that they are eventually going to consume. And so when I think about land and I think about scripture, you know, I'm a minister, so I'm always preaching, and then also always need a text every time I preach. And so there's a text in the Old Testament that it's a text that is used to introduce Jezebel when she, along with her husband Ahab, takes Naboth's garden. So Naboth is a village man. He has a nice garden that's beautiful and plush, but it happens to be next door to the king's land, and the king wants the land. So he goes and tries to negotiate with Naboth, and Naboth says, I can't give it to you. This is my lineage that's been given to me from my ancestors. I'm going to pass it on to my children. So he refuses to sell it. And then Jezebel comes and plots and kills him, essentially, and takes the land from him, and then gives it to her husband, Ahab. And Ahab takes the land happily, and he enjoys a nice garden, and life goes on happily for Ahab and Jezebel. But what happens to Naboth's children? The scripture doesn't tell us exactly what happens to their children. We're left to imagine it. You're left to imagine a family that is forced to get by and to make ends meet without land. And us who are working, living in impoverished areas are forced to do the same thing. We're living in neighborhoods that we didn't design, that frankly were organized to, in the words of Karl Marx, to commodify us, right? They were organized to extract our gifts and to have us kind of produce as much as we can, but extract our gifts. It wasn't, usually when a neighborhood is created, the neighborhood is created for people to thrive, for people to do well and to have all the experiences of life. That's not how the ghetto was created, right? That's not how the ghetto was imagined. The ghetto was imagined as a place where people can survive, maybe, but still have their gifts extracted from them. So this is where we're living, not in a place where land is there, we're being creative, where we are being imaginative with the land, where we are being good stewards of the land, but we're put in a place where we have very little power over the land and our gifts are being extracted. And frankly, even those who are deemed successful by conventional standards haven't really become free from that mindset, but they've become better commodities, and therefore they receive a better salary. But they're still bound in the sense that they don't control what they eat, they don't control what they put in their body, and therefore, even if I'm from that neighborhood and I go up there and I move somewhere else, I still have a lot of the same tendencies. And my life is shortened, not as extremely, but it is still shortened. So all that being said, long story short, what we're trying to do is to grab some ownership of the land. And our ownership is such a poor word, but that's the only English word that I know within our social economic system that says that we have access to this land and we can do to it what's in our best interest. The only way that we have a system to imagine doing that is to own it. And so we've taken ownership, stewardship over some swaths of land, and we're using that land to grow. And we're using that land to preach. And we're using that land to teach the people in our churches what the land is for, how did God intend it. What does all the agricultural texts in the Old Testament, what does that mean? What do they mean? Right? So we're using the land as a means of study, as a means of growth, and ultimately as a means of health, so that we don't have to die 20 years younger than we ought to. And in Baltimore City, there's one great farm. It's a farm called Strip to Love 2 Farm. It's in Sandtown, Winchester. It's on the west side of Baltimore, if you're familiar. It's between Monroe and Fulton on Lorman and Kavanaugh Street. They have 16 hoop houses. They grow food, sell it in the neighborhood, also sell it in the farmer's market, put it on a mobile truck, and they go around neighborhoods that are marginalized and sell it to people in marginalized neighborhoods. But they also teach people how to farm and teach people how to reimagine the land and reimagine food and how they should consume it and how it should be grown and how it is, in fact, a life source. So I think my time is up.
5 minutes.
I still have 5 minutes.
Yes.
Question.
Okay.
Mike.
Question. Your church has taken possession of the land, Reverend Harris. How has it done that?
So really, what we have is we have a lease. So we have a lease through the city. So the city. We're still not owners, right? So that's the challenge. But the city in Baltimore, there's lots of vacant land. So the city gave us. They knocked down a row of houses and they gave us the land for $1. So we have an acre and a half for the cost of $1. And we pay $120 for water a year.
Okay.
know the history or seen the film of the LA farm, which was the largest urban farm in the United States, and what politically has happened with that whole situation over time?
I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, definitely. I think it's called, does anybody know about LA Farm, the largest urban farm garden? It was huge. Anyway, there's a film, I'll get you the name of it. It's really a lesson to be learned about the leasing of the land from the city over 20, 30 years. And I'll connect you with that group because they've been fighting, and so there's been a transformation, but eventually it's very important to have, take over that lease.
Exactly, because the city's going to take it back at some point. They're going to give it to a developer, and they're going to build a nice condo.
In LA, this has been a huge national fight. And so it's a really good lesson to be learned and the people to connect with.
Yeah, so there's a concerted effort of people. It's a group called the Faith Lands Group. So there's a concerted effort for churches that there's some churches that have large amounts of land to make that land available so that marginalized groups, frankly, black churches, can put that land into a land trust and take over that land so that we can have land instead of leasing land from the city that will work with us as long as it's in their best interest.
Can we visit your farm?
Sure, you can come to Strength to Love 2 Farm. I mean, I'm not sure how much time you have on your hands.
This evening, can we come this evening?
You can drive by. I'm not going to be there this evening. By 3 o'clock, the farm workers are gone.
Okay.
So you can drive by this evening if you would like, but there's not going to be someone there to give you a formal tour.
And how far from here?
It's like 1800 block of Lorman Street.
18. So from here to Inner Harbor, same distance?
No, it's like here to the Inner Harbor, back and forth about 3 times.
Yeah.
So if you,
fair enough.
it's
Yeah.
on.
Fair enough.
It's in West Baltimore.
Yeah.
It's in West Baltimore. Actually, I mean, maybe if we, I have a meeting that is going to end around 6:30, and then at 6:30, if people wanted to see the farm, if there was a group, then I could meet people at the farm and then give you a short tour.
Or you can pick us up.
No.
Okay,
I'm of limited resources, my friend.
We'll meet you there.
Okay.
The address, please.
South Central. Okay. Okay. It's my time. So, but before I do want to plug a film that we do have this for Baltimore. We have a film called Baltimore Strange Fruit. It's put together by Eric Jackson and the Black Guild Institute. It's a fantastic farm that talks about the challenges nationally around, frankly, like black people and food issues, but then it narrows in on Baltimore, and it kind of tells a local Baltimore story. So that's a great documentary if you would like to view it also.
What's the name again?
It's called Baltimore Strange Fruit.
I just wanted to mention that you may not know that the genetically modified salmon is made half with eel on farms. So buy your salmon wild caught.
Yeah, but eventually it's going to mix in even with the wild caught ones, right? Yeah. So you got about another year or so to eat your wild caught salmon before it's part deal. 6:30.
Thank you.